It's time for another edition of Lewis at Large, 60 minutes of smart talk radio featuring guests from all walks of life in conversation with your host, Warner Lewis. So sit back and lend us your ears for the next hour. Now here with today's first guest is the host of Lewis at Large, Warner Lewis.
Well, welcome everybody to another segment of Lewis at Large. Yours truly, Warner Lewis from the flight deck. And of course, as always, that means some smart talk radio is in your future. And this segment, an interesting one indeed. We're going to be talking to author Lee Woodruff and also Dr. Gilbert Matla. Extraordinary work called In an Instant, chronicling Lee's family's journey to recovery following her husband, journalist Bob Woodruff's roadside bomb injury in Iraq. Lee is a very, very talented and well-known author. She has worked for a variety of publications, including Working Mother. She also has seen her work in Ladies' Home Journal, Real Simple, More, Good Housekeeping, Parade, amongst others. Dr. Matla is a board-certified in obstetrics and gynecology, as well as reproductive endocrinology and infertility, treats many U.S. veterans in his Annapolis, Maryland practice, and is a member of the American Society for Reproductive Medicine. As they say, you two, there's nothing like a good introduction, and that was nothing like a good introduction. Welcome to Lewis at Large.
Thank you, Warner. Nice to be here.
Well, again, we appreciate you both. We know this is an important subject, and we're very excited to have you on. Lee, if we could, let's start with you. If you could give our Lewis at Large listeners a little bit of a setup about Bob's injury. Tell us a little bit of the circumstances, and then we'll take it from there.
Yes. Well, Bob was the newly appointed co-anchor of World News in 2006, and he was back in Iraq covering the State of the Union for President Bush. It was a time in the war when we were supposed to be victorious, and what happened to Bob happens to our vets every single day. He was hit by a roadside bomb up close, shattered skull, massive traumatic brain injury, coma for 5 weeks, life changed in an instant, as the title of the book suggests. And it plunged us also into a world of military families in Bethesda Naval Hospital and a group of our population that I had not really known much about or come in contact with, and thereby formed our desire to start the Bob Woodruff Foundation and provide the same kind of help that we got to help Bob recover so beautifully to the rest of the American families who had fought and become injured on our behalf.
And then how did your partnership with Dr. Matla, tell us how that began?
That's really interesting because at the same time that we were becoming interested as a foundation in issues that most of America didn't know about, and most people don't want to talk about, the issues of intimacy after injury, whether that's in the bedroom, whether that's emotionally, and then, of course, infertility for those injured and unable to have children. Dr. Matla can describe in a second what he and all of his colleagues in the infertility industry, as well as the pharmaceutical companies like Ferring Pharmaceutical, were doing to help our veterans because of our government's inability to act on a bill which is presently in Congress that would give access to in vitro for injured vets. But we combined forces serendipitously. Dr. Matla and his partner, Dr. Levy, had been the doctors for Bob's and my in vitro twins 16 years ago, and it's all kind of a big, beautiful circle. Isn't it, Dr. Matla?
It is. It's ironic. Yeah. Warner, so the challenge of this is that currently veterans who serve, who are injured, don't have care for in vitro fertilization when they need it. And there's some 3,000 veterans who need IVF care to start or complete their families. And the irony of this is that if these veterans were still active duty, our government would in fact pay for their IVF care. But when they transition to the VA, they lose that benefit. And it's a head-scratcher as your listeners hear this, and people on the street as well. Why wouldn't we care for our veterans when they did so much for us? And
Right.
It dates back to 1992 when Congress prohibited this.
Well, that's kind of what I wanted to follow up with the head scratcher is, and again, I'm not trying to get political here, but what is this a political issue? Is this particular injury in this particular field of medicine for some reason considered separate or different? What's the origins here?
It shouldn't. I mean, back in 1992, IVF was a new medical care. It was fairly unsuccessful. It had some complications, and I don't fault Congress for prohibiting the VA from this. But 25 years later, It's a standard of care. It's done around the world and back again, with millions of babies born. Care was safe and highly successful. And Congress just needs to recognize that and change with the times and provide this care and allow the VA to provide this care. They want to provide the care. Credit to the VA.
Lee, if you would, take us inside the Woodruff family after this injury. Tell us about what was year number one all about.
My number one concern was Bob, so everything else had to go by the wayside. Excuse me. And so I was instantly aware of what many caregivers in the military go through and spouses when someone's injured. It was a big wake-up call.
Again, if you just joined us, yours truly, Warner Lewis from the flight deck of Lewis at Large Radio, talking to Lee Woodruff, author of a brand new work called In an Instant, A Family's Journey of Love and Healing. She is a writer, for contributing editor for Working Mother, also has written for Ladies' Home Journal, Good Housekeeping, Parade, and much more, and also talking to Dr. Gilbert Matla, who is a board-certified in obstetrics and gynecology as well as reproductive endocrinology. We are talking about Lee's husband's journalist Bob Woodruff's injury in Iraq and the care or lack thereof and opportunity for some of the medical issues that he faced. We're also talking about the nonprofit Bob Woodruff Foundation. Lee and Dr. Matla, let's talk about the foundation, specifically its mission, and specifically where are you in the journey of that foundation and its evolution?
We're 10 years out, and the issues keep changing. So early on in the war, it was things like packing backpacks and helping people build ramps, getting caregiver support. But now, suicide prevention, post-traumatic stress, reemployment, and most importantly, especially right now while we need Congress to act, the issue of getting this bill equalized to provide what our active duty service members get for in vitro treatment to those of us who are injured. So our foundation, at least right now, is very focused on helping those vets. Let's get this bill passed. Right now there are temporary measures in place, and the Woodruff Foundation is helping to try to get service members access to connect them to the clinics, connect them to medication. Ferring Pharmaceuticals is one of the companies involved with our Heart for Heroes program.
Yeah. So, Warner, essentially, we're looking for a permanent fix from Congress. We need that as we go forward, as more women enter combat, and unfortunately the world being the dangerous place that it is. But temporarily, we came up with a Band-Aid solution, if you will, where 103 medical practices similar to ours around the country offered to give deeply discounted care. Ferring Pharmaceuticals and others have donated medications at no charge under the Heart for Heroes program. And the Bob Woodruff Foundation has partnered with us to together reach out to these veterans and get them the care they need before they age out of their reproductive years. But it's only a temporary fix.
Yeah, Dr. Matla, for you, this is for you or Lee. Again, you bring up the issue of women in service. Undoubtedly, those injuries affect them as well. I'm curious as to if there is such a thing as an estimated number out there. How many vets are we talking about here across the country?
We're talking to roughly 3,000 vets by best Department of Defense estimates, which is not a big number, but they are all so deserving of us standing behind them and making them whole again medically, which isn't happening now. And moving forward, unfortunately, there are going to be more injuries that require IVF care for reproduction.
You touched on, again, when we're talking about reproductive medicine, and particularly in traumatic injury like this, it's a much different thing than probably being injured in your arm or in your leg. While those are tragic, there has got to be a strong psychological piece to this too, and I'm curious if you two would comment on the kind of things that they face that might be unique as part of this recovery process.
I think these young men, many young men, face unimaginable recoveries, and they rise to that occasion as veterans and as people, and then only to learn when they meet and marry somebody in their mid or late 20s and they go to their VA for care and they realize IVF care isn't covered. And I've heard veterans say, Warner, that they would rather go back to war and face re-injury than the depression they experience from not having a family.
Yeah.
That's what we're out to remedy.
And Warner, I have a story that always haunts me, and it is really applicable to this question. There's a young man whom I have a great relationship with, and I get to come in as the old grandma lady and flirt with these young boys. And there were a bunch of them who were lower half amputees, and all of them had bags, which means an ostomy bag, which means that they also had injuries to their reproductive organs. And I remember teasing one and saying, "Oh, you're gonna go off, and some sweet girl tonight is just going to take you home." And he looked at me honestly and he said, "Mrs. Woodruff, I don't know what girl's going to go home with me from a bar." And that's, somebody will. There's a Jack for every Jill, I told him, and somebody will fall in love with you, and I have no doubt about it. But to add to that, the insult of not being able to have a child when you meet the gal that you love,
right.
is just something that, we can't do that to these kids.
Right.
And we have this technology. We use it every day for everybody else. It's highly successful and safe. We need to use it for our veterans as well.
You touched on when you said kids. These are, I would have to think of the 3,000 you're talking about, 2,900 are under the ages of 30, if not younger. And with that, those that are older, do you treat those that are older, and do they have the same kinds of issues?
I don't think we truly know the desires of that full 3,000. Some may not want to have families, and some may be older. But there are many deserving people in that group that we need to reach and need to help.
Lee, what did, again, you and Bob have 4 children. At the time that this happened in Iraq, can you share with us a little bit how that affected the dynamics of the family and what was their role kind of going forward with their dad and you?
Well, my twins were 5, and then my older children were 12 and 14. So those were pretty young ages, and life just stopped to make way for Bob's recovery. My kids were home in New York. I was in Washington, and so I stepped out of their lives for about 6 weeks until we got Bob back to a rehab hospital up in New York. But I think my children were, that's a whole separate conversation on how you manage trauma with children and what you tell them and how much you protect them. But they were a huge part of Bob's healing and his recovery. He was so motivated to get better when those little kids would come jump on his lap or put their head on his shoulder. And we know for a fact, you can't quantify this medically, but people heal better with family, with love, with a connection of children. And it's so important. It's one of the reasons I'm so passionate about this cause.
Warner, as a physician caring for some of these injured men,
yeah.
I've heard people say quadriplegics who have many medical issues and many daily life challenges. I've heard them say, "It's my kids that make me get up in the morning and deal with my issues."
Dr.
That's what you want to give them.
Yeah, that's certainly a message of hope for sure. I'm curious, can you share with our listeners some of the technological, so to speak, and medical advances in this science of reproductive care, let's just say over the last 10 years, and obviously you must be very, very hopeful.
I am. This technology has advanced light years over 1992. We're now able to take one sperm and one egg and create an embryo and put that one embryo back in a woman and have a very high success rate. We have great control and great success.
The patients that you all work with, and Lee, I'll throw this out to you as well, those that you visit, are they necessarily hospitalized in veterans hospitals, or are they home, or are they in sort of private hospitals, so to speak, or is it just a mix of all three?
Boy, for me, it's a mix of all three. I get the chance every so often to go to a VA hospital. There are 4 centers of excellence for traumatic brain injury around the country, and I've been to all 4 of them. But many of the vets we meet through a variety of different ways. I mean, it's so funny. We always use the term veteran as if it's sort of a different gender or species, and really veterans are people too, is what I say. So when you ask somebody to name their attributes from father, uncle, employee, doctor, veteran comes down on the list somewhere about 13 in the way someone describes themselves, not only because of their humility as a veteran, but also it's just not how somebody who's served and has gotten out of the service defines themselves every single day. And that's part of the amazing humility to me of these heroes every single day. But we meet them in all walks of life. And every time I give a speech somewhere around the country and I ask people to raise their hands if they know someone who served, I'm always amazed at the number of hands that go up.
Let me ask this of both of you. You talked earlier about what you're seeing as sort of political roadblocks and certainly roadblocks to funding from the government and maybe an awareness and a sensitivity to this subject. What, in your opinion, what changes that? What is there a defining moment? Is there a trigger incident, so to speak, or what needs to happen? Or is it just simple political pressure to get a more responsive government to this kind of injury and these issues?
Yeah, I think that's probably the nail on the head. I think it's an uprising from all of us saying we want to make our veterans whole. We don't want to not provide for their creating families. In other words, we do this for active duty. We need to have that parity with our veterans. They served us. They were injured because of us. We owe them that.
And as Gil said, this is a finite number of people. This isn't a blank check that's going to take care of untold millions. If we can't take care of less than 3,000 people, and let's add a few more to that as the years progress, then shame on us as Americans, because we have more than enough in this country.
And, Warner, I worry about young men and women who volunteer for our armed forces who may learn of this and say, if I'm not going to be made whole, maybe I won't serve after all, or maybe I'm too afraid to serve, knowing my government won't stand behind me.
What is there anything in particular on the horizon politically that makes you a little bit more hopeful, or are you seeing this as a dead end and we're at a real call for action point?
I think we're at a call for action, but I'm also very hopeful that a lot of our legislators, from advocacy work, from a lot of the work veterans have done on Capitol Hill themselves, will have created an awareness and a commitment to hopefully get this passed.
Is there, what kind of support or again, non-support, you touched on it a little bit earlier, from the Veterans Administration? I would think this would have to be right in their wheelhouse.
I was just emailing with Secretary Bob McDonald, the head of the VA, about 2 or 3 days ago, because I was so, personally as a citizen, so disheartened by our government that we can't pass this. And he said, Lee, I am so with you. I'm so determined that this goes through. This is not a VA issue. As Gil said, they're all very much in favor of getting this passed. Honestly, I think it's a political issue right now. I think the people have made it a football, and a couple of loud, squeaky wheels are trying to change the facts. And the facts are, as Gil said them. This is a technology that works. It can't possibly be a political, religious, or ethical Rubicon, because we've already crossed that with active duty service members. So what's the issue? We're equalizing it, as Gil just said, for those who are most egregiously injured and have gone over and actually gotten injured for us. We already offer it to service members on active duty. It's unconscionable to me that our government can't unlock its gridlock.
Yeah, I would.
Wheels in motion.
I would think those that you've treated would be the strongest advocates for this, for sure. Well, look, I know you all have several more of these to do. We'll start to wind down here. If you would, share with our listeners, if we could, a little bit more information on how people can find out more about the Bob Woodruff Foundation, and if there are other sources of information about these kinds of injuries, the reproductive medicine, et cetera. Share any kind of contact information you'd like.
Sure. Our current program to help veterans, such as the Heart for Heroes program.org, heartforheroes.org, sponsored by Ferring Pharmaceuticals. There's a patient advocacy organization, a great resource called resolve.org. And our medical organization is the American Society for Reproductive Medicine.org.
Okay. And Lee, what about finding out more about the work that you do and information on Bob as well?
That would be great. It's bobwoodrufffoundation.org, and you can see all of the things that we're involved in. We're really proud of our work. And Bob is covering Asia for ABC News. So he's been back and forth from Beijing all year, and he is so fortunate to be back doing the work he loves as a journalist.
Well, it would be very easy to see how this becomes obsessive in its nature. It's an important subject, and thank you all for the work that you all are doing in raising this awareness, and anything we can do on this end, we'd be happy to help. And thank you for your time today, both of you.
Warner, thanks for having us.
You bet. We'll be back with more right after this on Lewis at Large. You love your dog and you love your yard, but sometimes what your dog leaves behind can make you not love your yard so much. Well, when that happens, it's Call of Duty Pet Waste Removal Service to the rescue. Large or small dogs, big yard or small, call Call of Duty. They clean up the mess your dog leaves behind. So if you're tired of cleaning pet waste from your yard, call Call of Duty. 764-6 764-7224. That's 764-7224. Prompt, effective, courteous service is on the way. Your yard is left clean and waste-free. So don't waste any more time on waste. Call Call of Duty in Lawrence, 764-7224. That's 764-7224. Or visit their website, callofduty2010.web.com. Well, welcome everybody to another edition of Lewis at Large. Yours truly, Warner Lewis from the flight deck. And of course, that means some smart talk radio is in your future. And today's segment, certainly no exception. We are so excited to have Charlotte Stewart with us, an extraordinary talent with a brand new workout called Little House in the Hollywood Hills, A Bad Girl's Guide to Becoming Miss Beadle, Mary X, and Me, released just recently. Who is Charlotte Stewart? Well, she's many things. An actress for sure. She was interesting. She began her showbiz career as Disneyland's first walk-around character of Alice in Wonderland and went on to have an extraordinary show business career, which we will talk about in depth. Lots of adventures, some good, some not so good, but she is very candid, witty, and smart, and we are pleased to have her here. Charlotte, how are you, my friend?
Warner, I am just fine. Just fine. It's a beautiful day. I'm sitting on a park bench in Cambria, California.
Well, let's do this. Let's share with our Lewis at Large listeners a little bit. First of all, let's talk how you got into, first of all, becoming the first walk-around Alice in Wonderland character at Disneyland. Let's start there. That's interesting.
Well, I'll tell you, I was 17 years old. I had left my hometown of Yuba City, California. I wasn't a very good student ever, and all my friends were going away to college, and my grades wouldn't allow it. So I thought, what do I do? What do I do? So I enrolled at the Pasadena Playhouse College of Theater Arts in Pasadena. It was actually the State Theater of California, and that my parents agreed to. I think they were just hoping for anything at that point. But I did. I fell in love with acting. But while I was there as a student, around just before the holidays, a man came there and said he was looking for students to play the walk-around characters at Disneyland. Now, Disneyland had only been opened for 2 years. I had never been. Just the thought of it was so exciting. So I followed him around all day long. And he kept saying, no, you don't have long hair. And Alice in Wonderland's supposed to have this long hair. And I said, I'll do anything. I'll buy hair. I badgered him so much, he said, okay. So I got the part of Alice. I ran down the street in Pasadena to the Woolworths, and I bought myself a ponytail, the kind you can pin on, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, I was desperate. And I got to play Alice, and I was there all through the Christmas season, and I had a ball. My whole job was to meet and greet people, get my picture taken, and a lot of times I could take a child on a ride for free because, in those days you had to have the E-ticket.
Right.
You had to get A, B, C, D, and E being the best, and they were expensive. So there were a lot of, families that could not afford anything but the entrance fee. So I would just pick up these kids and take them with me. I'd go on all the rides, and it was just a great job. And I think I was making $1.75 an hour.
And loving every minute of it, probably.
And was so happy to get it.
Did you come, was there any acting or any kind of show business in your parents or in your family?
No, never. In fact, I did one horrible school play, I think. And it was, it didn't even interest me at all. I was just desperate to leave Yuba City. Not that there's anything wrong with Yuba City, but I wanted to do something, and I thought maybe I'd be a writer. I don't know. I was, like I say, desperate. And my husband just came over to ask me if I wanted coffee. I was going to go get coffee.
That's all right.
Anyway,
this is live radio. It's fine.
Hello?
Well, yes, whatever you need to do, we're good.
Oh, I'm fine. I'm just, anyway, the Playhouse, I heard about an audition for a really low-budget movie, and I got the part, and that was my first real acting role. It's called Damaged Goods.
Wow.
And my dad, it played Yuba City at the local drive-in. My dad went every single night in his pickup truck. Is that sweet?
Yes, that is sweet. By the way, was it the kind of movie that it was okay for Dad to see?
Oh yeah.
Okay.
It was a teenage, bad love story. I think it's centered around venereal disease.
Okay, wonderful.
The guy that made the movie got the funding from the state of California Educational Department or something like that.
Okay, excellent. Okay, okay. So now you are really bitten by the showbiz bug, and so tell us about. Again, you've done film work, but you're obviously very, very well known for your work as Miss Beadle on Little House on the Prairie. Is Little House on the Prairie, is that next? Is that right in line there? Or tell us about that timeline.
Oh gosh, no. I didn't do. We're talking about 58, 59, and then I didn't get Little House on the Prairie till 73. So there was a lot of episodic television then. Bachelor Father, My Three Sons, Margie, GE Theater, Bonanza, Gunsmoke, Hawaii Five-0. I did all those shows, one after another. Little House came much later in the career.
Okay, I'm curious, and because we will get to Little House, we also want to get to that really pretty
the bad girl part.
Well, a little bit, yeah, but it's your life. It's part of your life. I'm curious, just from an acting point of view. Did you enjoy the regular work, the regular character that you played on Little House for so long, or did you like, so to speak, jumping around being a character actress on a variety of different shows?
I was an actor who would act in anything. You know what I mean? The lucky part was, and I got to tell you, my career was just one lucky thing after another. I fell into the most incredible circumstances. None of my own doing, right place, right time, or whatever that is. And any actor, their ambition is to get on a series, at least, in the early days, because for a steady job, you just live from one job to another. And I have to tell you that most of the time that I was working, I kept a steady job at a production company. I rented office space to directors, producers, writers who were, getting productions up and running. And then I would save up my vacation days when I got a job and go off and do an acting role for 2 or 3 days and come back. And, I did that my whole life. So a lot of the actors will go into real estate. They work in a restaurant.
Right.
They do anything that allows them to drop it at a second to go do an acting job.
Right.
So, of course, when you get a series, it's just, oh, God, it's, heaven. Just to know you're working tomorrow.
You're listening to Lewis at Large. Yours truly, Warner Lewis, again from the Flight Deck. And, of course, we're talking with Charlotte Stewart, a talented actress, but a brand new work, a memoir by her called Little House in the Hollywood Hills, A Bad Girl's Guide to Becoming Miss Beadle, Mary X, and Me. Okay, let's talk about Bad Girl's Guide. 1960s, wonderful, wonderful classic rock music being released. Lots of marijuana out there, and God knows all other kinds of chemicals out there for you.
The Beatles had hit. We had L.A. riots in Los Angeles. We had, I had a clothing store called the Liquid Butterfly. So, if you remember, there was an album that Neil Young put out where it was the picture was just the back of his jeans with patches all over it. That's what I did at the Liquid Butterfly. Is I patched jeans. I made peasant dresses. I have a picture in my book with Joni Mitchell at my house up in Topanga. We were hippies in those days.
How many?
Of course, I was a working hippie. Oh, a dog just came up and sniffed me. Hi, puppy.
Did you? How many? Can you count how many pairs of regular blue jeans you slit down the bottom and wove in or sewed in some fabric to make bell bottoms out of them? Did you do any of that?
Oh my God, you remember that?
Oh, you bet I do.
Yes, all down the bottom of the jeans on the outside. You cut it and you made a big triangle, and then you put in whatever fabric. Oh, I did tons of those. And I made cowboy shirts. You don't love my cowboy shirts. I made it wasn't patchwork, but every piece of the pattern was a different material. Was a different print. And my cowboy shirts were very well known. Well, and I sew to this day. I sew every single day. I made my guest room into a studio. I sew from 10 in the morning till 4 in the afternoon with a brief break for lunch. And I make tote bags with pictures from Little House on the Prairie.
Okay.
And I sell them to raise money for a cancer program in Napa, where I live. I live up in Northern California, Napa.
Wow.
And I'm a cancer survivor, so I support a lot of, programs that are so beneficial to, it's not just to cure cancer, it's to get your life back once you've had cancer. And so that's one of the programs I support. It's called the Wellness Center, and it's fabulous. Anyway, I'm off track here.
No, you're fine. But if we explore the 1960s, let's just go to 1968. If you were a baby boomer in that particular time, you were probably one of two things. You were completely hipped out. A lot of concerts, a lot of free things in the park, lots of drugs, lots of occasionally the penicillin shots from time to time, you name it. Or you were completely the opposite, and you were Niedermeyer. You were in a fraternity, or you were Greek, and you had parents that said, "You're not going to go to that school. They do drugs at that school."
Actually, I wasn't any of those.
Right.
I was right straight down the middle. I was a farm girl come to L.A. I was a wannabe hippie. I don't think I ever was a hippie. I never lived in a tent and, washed my clothes in a creek. I had an apartment. I worked. I had a car. But all my friends dressed like my friends. I smoked dope like my friends. I drank a little too much, but that became a problem later in my story. My dad was an alcoholic. He actually died of alcoholism, and my whole family was, afflicted with that. But we're all sober now, so that was a good part of the story.
So like many, and by the way, I'm not lessening its importance, but you were involved with drugs, abuse of alcohol. You did a little crack. That came a
little bit later.
Yeah, we had some money.
When it was a little more popular.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think I ever, fell down on the floor and stayed there for 6 days on crack. Sometimes it would get passed at a party, and it was quite a high. I'd never experienced anything like that. The whole world drops off, and you get this euphoric feeling. But I couldn't afford cocaine. I did it mainly as a social, drug with friends.
And you had
a lot of men think that that's how you get women is you offer them coke.
Right. Right. That's not right. But and speaking of men, you had multiple relations, which frankly was not completely unique. But I'm just curious through all of this
pretty
period.
Hot men.
Yes.
You're right.
Yeah. We can name everybody from John Voight to Tim Considine to my gosh.
Well, I married Tim.
Yeah. Yep. That is right. Oh, that is right. And by the way, for a reminder for our Lewis at Large listeners, you should know this, but he played Mike on My Three Sons, the one that went off to the Navy. Is that right?
Yeah, that's right.
That's
Mike on My Three Sons.
Yep.
And he was Spin and Marty on the Disney Channel, which we didn't have Disney channels then, on the Disney Club, Mickey Mouse Club, which I had a huge crush on him when I was in high school. Oh, my God. And then I couldn't believe it. I was going to work with him. And then he asked me out. And then, by God, we got married,
Wow.
There's all those teen magazine things, all those shots of us frolicking in the surf or whatever it was.
Okay, so I'm curious, during this period, whether it's the drug abuse, alcohol, et cetera, are you still effectively and functionally working?
Oh, God, yes. I never lost the ability to work. When it really started slowing down, and that was after Little House on the Prairie, so we're getting close to the early 80s. I worked on the show until 77, and then I got married again. I married a magician who magically made my money disappear.
Okay.
Not really. Just we got very careless behind a lot of, partying. I was told, George, we should have had a party, not a wedding. Would have been much more appropriate. But needless to say, so I was also getting older. When I was doing Little House, I was 34 and somewhere around in there. 73, 34. And you don't get as many parts the older you get. The closer to 40 that you get, the parts kind of drop off. But I had money at the time, and so I just continued to kind of party. But the bad thing that happened, what really sunk me, besides my drinking, and I was drinking a lot then, because I had nothing to get up for in the morning. I was just partying and sleeping in and stuff.
So as you look back, let me ask you a question real quickly. As you look back on it, you said that alcoholism was probably in the DNA to begin with. But
right.
Do you think, super hypothetically here, if you had the normal sort of 8 to 5 job, would the drinking have been the same, or was it filling time and entertainment and sort of nothing else to do, so to speak?
I think the second part there is about right. I had a lot of time on my hands. I had money to live. I wasn't desperate for a job. And I was married to another alcoholic at that point. And in fact, when Tim and I were married, my first husband, Tim Considine, at one point he suggested that we stop drinking and doing marijuana. And he did, and I didn't. I just hid it. I thought it was the stupidest thing I'd ever heard. Why would we want to do that? So that's literally my behavior behind that really broke up our marriage. And, I continued that behavior for a long time, thinking, well, it's nobody's business. And this is kind of why I put some of this in my book, quite honestly. If somebody reads this and they identify with it, or they see their son or daughter, brother, sister, mother, father in this behavior, maybe they'll realize that there is a place to go for help. Because I finally did, after, telling my friends to mind their own business, I finally hit bottom, and along with that was I had a business manager who was addicted to cocaine, and I didn't know, and was using my money to support his habit.
Oh, boy.
And I ended up losing everything.
Wow.
All my money, my house.
And Charlotte, when was that? When did that happen?
That was in the early 80s.
Okay.
81, 82. I finally went into treatment in 1984, and that saved my life, quite literally.
You tell us also, and again, I'm just mindful of time here. We could talk for a long time here, but would you share with our listeners too? I want to cover your battle with breast cancer, and tell us about that situation and the resolution of that. Yeah,
well, that was in the early, 90s, 91. And I was doing Twin Peaks at the time, the original series Twin Peaks with David Lynch, who I had done Eraserhead with many years earlier. And I was diagnosed with it. I was living alone at the time. I was sober, drove myself to the hospital, had surgery, drove myself home. And, there I was. I was so self-sufficient. And then they had to do a second surgery. And that really knocked me on my butt. And then I was smart enough to ask for help then. I had friends come over and bring food and take care of me. And then that's when I got together with my third husband, David Banks, who I had known since the Pasadena Playhouse. And he took care of me.
Let me ask you something. At that time, were you surrounded with people that were supportive, that were not necessarily substance abusers, and where was your career at that particular moment?
My career then was doing okay because I was doing Twin Peaks, and it became a big hit overnight. Unfortunately, it didn't last but a year and a half, but my career was just fine then. I had my steady job at the same time that I was working in the production facility, leasing office space. I was doing just fine.
What is as you look,
and no drugs and no drinking at that point.
Yeah. How did you and not so much evolve as an actress, but more as a person? From the beginning of that very, very high-profile regular role on Little House to the time that series ended, what changed in your life? What you went in one way and came out another. What might have been the metamorphosis for you there?
Oh gosh, I don't know. I just feel I was so fortunate to have good friends and a fabulous family who supported me the whole way. I mean, financially, I've always supported myself, even in the hard times. I think I married a wonderful man. I had great friends. Life was just wonderful, and then he became ill, and then I ended up taking care of him. So there's something, when you kind of when you finally live your life responsibly, good things happen. People come to you and offer you wonderful things. And I had a friend, her name was Mickey Fox. She was a Fellini actress in Italy, and she was so funny, and she said, "Charlotte, you could fall down a manhole and come up with a set of dishes." And I think that's about my life,
Yeah.
I have just, like I said it before, I've fallen into some incredible circumstances. And you mentioned before the men in my life, before I married David. I was in a business, entertainment industry, surrounded with incredibly talented and handsome men.
Yeah.
And I wasn't so bad looking myself,
Mm-hmm.
I think I'm funny, and I'm smart, and I've always taken care of myself. I never, ever, ever looked for a man to take care of me, ever. I never gave anybody benefits for parts, if you know what I mean. I never had to do that. I was always on my own merit. So, I still had my pride, and I think that's kind of what made the difference. And then I in the last, David died in 2012. We were married 20 years, the last 10 of which he was very ill, and that's why we moved to Napa. He had emphysema, and I wanted to be near my family in case I needed their help, and I did. And but there's something that happens when you become a caregiver. God, I so respect caregivers.
Charlotte, this might sound like a little bit of a funny question, but despite the alcoholism, despite the breast cancer, despite some of the maybe possibly dysfunctional or negative relationships that you've had, on balance, as you look back on it all, is there anything in particular that you would have changed, looking back on it from today's perspective?
You know what? No. Not. I mean, I hopefully didn't hurt that many people. I know I hurt my first husband, Tim Considine. We are friends today. In fact, he took the picture on the back of my book. We are very good friends today. And that was the thing I feared the most, is that my behavior had hurt people. Now, there were some real jerks in my life, and I'm sorry if I hurt them, but good riddance, people that, kind of hung on me a little bit. Because when I had money, I was able to, I was the one that bought the cocaine for the party or whatever. And some of those friends weren't real friends, and I'm glad to be rid of them. But no, today I can look back and say, whatever I did during those years made me who I am today. And I'm a very happy person today.
Well, that is for sure. That's very, very obvious. The work is called Little House in the Hollywood Hills, A Bad Girl's Guide to Becoming Miss Beadle. Mary X and me, Charlotte Stewart, tremendous talent, and obviously a life filled with extraordinary opportunities, extraordinary choices. And
have we got one more minute?
Yes, we do, because I wanted to ask you a couple more questions, but also where people can.
I want to tell you that, I'm sitting here in Cambria, California, which is where the Hearst Castle is. William Randolph Hearst built the castle. The last time I was here with Jim Morrison.
Oh, is that right? Oh, we
went on a road trip together. I can't remember when he died. It was about 6 months before he died, but he was in trouble. He was really living a full down-and-out alcoholic life.
Yeah.
He was my drinking buddy in those years. He was my drinking buddy. And he had been arrested in Florida for indecent exposure on stage, and he was being hounded by paparazzi, and he's facing a trial and possibly prison. He didn't know what was going on. And he called me up and he said, "I got to get out of town. You want to go?" I said, "Sure." So he came and picked me up, and we drove up the coast of California to Cambria. It took us 3 days. and because we stopped at every bar and pool hall along the way, and took the bus up to San Simeon, the Hearst Castle. In fact, there's a picture of him in my book eating a hot dog at San Simeon.
Yep.
And that was the last time I was here in Cambria.
When you guys would stop along the way, little roadside bar somewhere, whatever, you walk in, did people go, holy crap, look at Charlotte Stewart and Jim Morrison?
They didn't know him at all.
Okay.
Not a clue. By that time, he had a full beard.
Yeah.
He had put on a little weight.
Yeah.
And in fact, we stopped here to see friends. I have friends who live here in Cambria. And we stopped to see friends, and I said, we pulled in, and my friend Peter Felds came out. He's a metal sculptor, pretty well known around here. And I said, hi, Peter, it's my friend Jim. Jim, this is Peter. And they met and went off talking about sculpture and ironworks and stuff. And I went in to see Peter's wife, but they never had a clue. And in fact, I'm going to see Peter tomorrow. He's coming to this rock and mineral show. And I'm going to say, remember when I was here with my friend? Did you know who that was?
Oh, gosh. Well, hey, listen, before we close out here, how can people get a copy of the book and find out a little bit more about you?
Okay, well, it's available on Amazon, I understand, right now. And if they want to get a signed copy, they have to contact me, and I'm going to give you a P.O. box, okay? Will that work?
Sure.
A P.O. box. It's P.O. Box 3125, Napa, N-A-P-A, California 94558. They can write to me, and I can order it through PayPal, or they can go directly to Amazon and buy a book there. But then it means they have to ship me the book to sign it and all that. But it's available on Amazon. I think it's on what's the other one that you read on your computer? I can't remember.
Oh, Kindle?
Kindle. It's on Kindle, too.
All right.
So, and then I'm going to do the audiobook. Just got a contract to do the audiobook, so I'm going to do that myself.
That's a good project. Listen.
I know. They said it's going to take probably 5 days.
Well,
it's 309 pages.
Before we get out of here, we told you, I know you've done dozens and dozens, and you'll do dozens more interviews, but no one will ask you this one. When's the last time you washed your own car by hand?
2 days ago.
Wow. Wow. Good for you.
2 days ago, yeah, you don't turn the hose on it. You fill a bucket, because we're in a drought over here in California. You fill a bucket, and then you get a big rag, a soapy rag, and then you go over the car, and then maybe at the last minute you give it a squirt. But no, we're very conscious of saving water here. So yeah, day before yesterday.
There you go, everybody. Charlotte Stewart washed her own car 2 days ago. Love it. Hey, listen, thank you so much. It's been a joy talking to you. Would love to have you on again. Best of luck with the book. And
well, Warner, you have my phone number. Call me anytime.
I will. You trust me. I will do that. Thanks so much. All right. Take care.
Thank you so much. And thanks to your listeners.
You bet. We'll be back with more right after this on Lewis at Large. You love your dog and you love your yard, but sometimes what your dog leaves behind can make you not love your yard so much. Well, when that happens, it's Call of Duty Pet Waste Removal Service to the rescue. Large or small dogs, big yard or small, call Call of Duty. They clean up the mess your dog leaves behind. So if you're tired of cleaning pet waste from your yard, call Call of Duty, 764-7224. That's 764-7224. Prompt, effective, courteous services on the way. Your yard is left clean and waste-free. So don't waste any more time on waste. Call Call of Duty in Lawrence, 764-7224. That's 764-7224. Or visit their website, callofduty2